What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and as I've shared with you before, I have more data that I keep behind the scenes than I could ever possibly do content on. And it is a shame because there are so many cool things that are going on in this Pokemon collecting and investing hobby that I want to share with you. So because the information is so relevant and because I just simply don't have the time to do dedicated videos around all of it, I have started doing this state of the hobby type video at the end of every single month, so we can look at some of the awesome things that are going on behind the scenes here in the Pokemon collecting and investing space. And as you will see before you right here, these are three different price graphs, and these are actually the graphs from last month's State of the Hobby video. So first we're going to talk about what we were discussing last month, and then on the next slide I'll go ahead and show you what has transpired over the last 30 days. So the things that we're looking at right here is these are the graphs of the top 20 singles cards from every single set that has a booster box in the XY era, in the Sun Moon era, and in the Sword and Shield era. And what I've been doing is I've been aggregating those top 20 singles cards and their total value, as you can see, going all the way back to September of last year, right? I've been doing this for quite a while, and because I've been doing this for a while, we can see these price graphs and these trends and how the singles cards have been moving over time. And last month was a really kind of watershed moment for us here in the singles card space because we saw a lot of really exciting patterns. And normally, this is what we were talking about right here, okay? So first and foremost, I'm going to be doing a year-end where we'll look at the whole year view of all of these, but just over this last month, we talked about the trends that we were seeing. We'll start in the upper right-hand corner with the XY era. First off, 2024 has been a banner year for XY singles cards. If you look at it, ever since January of this year, the entire 12 months, the total aggregate value of those top 20 singles cards in the XY era have been upward and to the right. But what we talked about last month is if you look up there in the upper right-hand corner of that graph, you'll see started to get a little aggressive, right? We're starting to see the price start to appreciate there at a higher rate than we'd seen earlier in the year. And now Sun and Moon, not the same rate of appreciation, but still, it has been on an upward and the right trajectory ever since May of this year. And Sword and Shield was a big call out. Now, I do a dedicated video just on Sword and Shield and what's going on month over month in that space. So if you want a more detailed view on Sword and Shield, it has been incredible, and you've got to see what happened this month. You can check that out. But the general overall trend that we talked about last month in this video series was you see that it was very flat for most of the beginning of the year. Then it went on that aggressive spike up, right? We all remember when the booster boxes started to sell out on the Pokemon Center here in the US. Everybody started to FOMO, right? The prices went through the roof. Subsequently, the prices fell afterwards, which we all expected, but then it got flat again, and then we started to see this angle upward. And those orange lines represent what we call on this channel support lines, right? Whenever singles cards start to get down to a certain point, they're not going to drop forever. We all understand that. Singles cards will get to a certain price point where the market just starts to scoop them up, and those are called support levels. And we have seen time and time again where you hit these support levels, you see it in XY, you see it in Sun and Moon, you see it in Sword and Shield, and then after these support levels start to form, then we see prices start to rise, okay? So that's what we were talking about last month, and Sword and Shield just absolutely balled out. So the new months, this is the December view right here. And as you can see, we've seen some really awesome price growth, especially in that Sword and Shield block right there. So what we're going to talk about on this slide is look at Sword and Shield. Again, I did a dedicated video on this. We talked about the cards that have been moving the most. We talked about cards that still have opportunity. But as a whole, the aggregate value of those top 20 singles cards had a banner month from November to December. And then in the upper right-hand corner, if you look at that, again, we started to see some accelerated growth in those XY singles cards. Well, that had continued from November into December, okay? So we've seen some very aggressive growth there as well. Even Sun and Moon started to take a more aggressive upward in the right trajectory there over the last month. So it looks like the singles card space right now is really starting to heat up. People are piling in. These cards were undervalued, especially if you look at the XY era. So if you look on the left of each of those graphs, that represents the aggregate value, and I'll talk to you here in just a second about it. But you can see that XY had actually the lowest jumping off point when we started this value aggregation back there in October of last year. So the other thing that I wanted to call out, because you'll hear this from time to time, is, well, this is due to seasonality, right? Like the seasonality, it's Christmas time, everybody's buying singles cards as gifts, and that's why I have those red arrows on there, because if you will look, last year, heading into the holiday season in the XY era, October, November, December, even into January, the total of those top 20 singles cards were actually coming down. Same thing in Sun and Moon. I mean, September, October, November, December, January, February in Sun and Moon, the total of those top 20 singles cards was coming down. Even Sword and Shield, this was the end end of Sword and Shield era. Everybody knew alt arts were going to be hot. Everybody knew Sword and Shield was a wildly popular era. Even with all of that, through the holidays, October, November, December, January, February, March, the value of those top 20 singles cards was flat. And this is why I do what I do on this channel. It's simply to add some validity to some thoughts and feelings that are out there. People might think or feel that, you know, different cons can drive prices one way or the other, or certain things can influence, you know, the PSA grading volumes, or, you know, seasonality can drive single card prices. And there's a degree of truth to that. But, you know, we can use data like this to really help us understand what the actual facts are. So I thought this was really cool to look at the way, you know, last year through the holidays, these singles cards have performed versus how they're performing now. The reality is singles cards are just having a heck of a month and a heck of a time right now. Will they be able to hold on to it? We'll have to wait and see. I fully expect at some point we're going to see more support lines, or what they're called as resistance lines, right? When cards get a certain height, when they get a certain point, then you'll start to hit some resistance, and then we'll start to see them flatten out again. But that's why we do this on the channel. I think it's a ton of fun, and I always go ahead and talk about some singles cards from one of these eras. So last month we highlighted some singles cards from the Sun and Moon era. This month I wanted to highlight some cards from the XY era because it hammers home another point that I always talk about a lot. And so if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you have the Rayquaza card right there. That's the chase card from Ancient Origins. So you've got a big name Pokemon from a huge set, and that card is up 82.3% over the last year. It has been incredible to watch this card go on a run. Then down below that, you've got a Gengar, right? That's the Gengar from Phantom Forces. Again, another hugely popular Pokemon from one of the best sets from that era in Phantom Forces. And again, it is up 49.95% over the last year. It's been stair-stepping its way up slowly, steadily, gaining value. And then on the left, you have the Umbreon right there, right? And that's from Fates Collide. And everybody knows evolutions right now are insanely hot. We talk about it all the time on this channel, but you don't have to just look at Sword and Shield. You don't have to just look, you know, at Sun and Moon or at, you know, Scarlet and Violet. You can go back. You can go even further back. I talk about going back all the time on this channel. And this Umbreon right here, I think still represents a pretty good value, right? It's a $50 card, and it's one of the top chase cards from that set. It's up 52.94% over the last year. And, you know, I coached high school football for 4 years. After I got done playing, I went back and I coached for a while. And it was really cool. We used to always say big time players show up for big time games, right? And whenever I think about, you know, singles card investing, I'm always looking for big time players, Rayquaza, Gengar, Umbreon, and I'm always looking for them to perform, and especially in big time games, right? Like when the market is getting frothy, when things are starting to accelerate in price, I expect these big names to really outperform some of the lesser names, even though the lesser names might gain in value because the broader market is going up. I always expect the big time players to show up in big time games. Now, if you're this deep into the video, I hope you're having a ton of fun because we share fun content like this all the time, and I've got to do my selfish plug now. So if you're having fun and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Like I said, we do this every month, tons of data on this channel. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, and if you got questions or comments, drop them down below. So now that that's out of the way, we are also going to start looking at those actual aggregate values I was telling you about, because to me this is really important. So here you have the XY and you have the Sun and Moon graphs, but on the left-hand side, you actually see how those aggregate prices have moved over time, okay? So you see on the left, those are the Sun and Moon prices. You see September to October to November to December to January to February to March, they were working their way down, and then ever since then, the aggregate value has been working its way up. And then, as I said, in the XY space, this just shows you those aggregate values month over month, right? And you can see the gains haven't been huge. A lot of them have been 1.5%, 1.7%. You know, you have a 2.47 in there, you got a 2.92 in there, but these aren't huge month over month gains. But for me, they're steady, they're predictable, they're healthy, they're gains that these cards will be able to hold on to versus what we saw in the Sword and Shield example earlier with this huge spike up and then the subsequent huge spike down. To me, I really, really like this price growth, and I think it's very, very healthy. So we don't only look at singles cards, obviously we'll look at booster boxes too. So for this graph right here, we're looking at the booster box prices over that same period of time for the XY and the Sun and Moon era. And I always say this, the XY era you've got to take with a bit of a grain of salt, right? The overall number of these XY sealed booster boxes available to the hobby is relatively small, right? Like we all know that. It was a totally different time in the XY era. There were far, far, far fewer people who were keeping these products sealed and holding them for a long-term investment perspective. However, that means that these also have very, very high prices, high jumping off points, right? But you see these big spikes and valleys and all of that. That's because one of those, like a single Phantom Forces sealed booster box, can fundamentally change this graph over time. But what I'm looking for is this. You see that green line? If you were just to trend line this out from the bottom left corner all the way to the upright, you have this nice growth pattern, which is what we expect in sealed products. Now, what really got me excited, and again, I don't expect Sword and Shield to follow the exact same path as Sun and Moon, but Sun and Moon booster boxes just don't seem to have any slowdown in them. There are so many Sun and Moon booster boxes that are up over that $700 price point. And I will say, again, same thing, not to the same degree as XY, but there were far fewer sealed collectors in the Sun and Moon era than there are in the Sword and Shield, and especially as there are now in the Scarlet and Violet. So it's going to be interesting to see if, you know, the additional sealed products further into the future will depress the price, or if we're going to be able to see a bunch of Sword and Shield booster boxes over the next 5 or 6 years start to get to that $400, $500, $600, $700 range like we've seen with the Sun and Moon booster boxes. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch, and it certainly is encouraging to see the generation before Sword and Shield performing the way that it is, because Sword and Shield has some fantastic cards and some awesome booster boxes in there as well. Next thing we're looking at here is we've got to talk about the Scarlet and Violet era, because how could we talk about the totality of the hobby if we don't talk about some of the most exciting things that are going on in that space? And obviously Surging Sparks is dominating everything right now. What's interesting to me, and what I think is actually pretty encouraging, is you see the Pikachu and you see the Latias special illustration rare cards right there. They're starting to flatten out. Now it's a little bit early to start saying, you know, they've started to reach this is the price point that they're going to be. I still expect a lot of Surging Sparks to be opened in the year and a half ahead, and I do expect more of these products to hit the market to meet some of the demand that's kind of pent up right now, but it's going to be interesting. And to do a counterpoint to that, if you look, Surging Sparks booster boxes are already at $215. It is just wild to see these booster box prices as high as they are. I fully expect more of these to hit the market at some point, and I expect the prices to at least come down to MSRP once those start to flood in. I don't know when it'll happen. I have no guarantee that will happen, right? That's just my gut feeling, but I do think it is very interesting, and we'll just have to see the effect that has on the overall Surging Sparks hobby. Now, the next cards we're talking about right here are the Greninja from Twilight Masquerade and the Twilight Masquerade booster box. So Greninja's starting to find a lot of support right at $300. As you can see, really over the last month, it's leveled off at about $320. Then you got the Twilight Masquerade booster boxes, which are settling just below MSRP, right in the high 158, excuse me, dollar range. So just below MSRP. It's going to be interesting to see what Twilight Masquerade does, you know, over the next 6 or 8 months, and if we get more of that back into the hobby. But I do keep that as kind of like a barometer. I'm keeping an eye on that one as well. Then one of my favorite cards from the Scarlet and Violet era is that Magikarp from Paldea Evolved. It is up over $200 right now. Over the last 3 months, it is up 91%. The artwork is phenomenal. The gem rate is abysmal. It has everything that I could possibly want in a card. I am fortunate enough that I actually have a couple of these raw ones. They're not worthy of sending through to get graded, but it's really, really cool that these cards are performing so well. So I really love that card, and it's another one that I'm keeping an eye on when I think about what the future big chase cards in Scarlet and Violet are going to be. So of course, we can't talk about Scarlet and Violet without talking about what's coming down the pipe on January 17th. Obviously, Prismatic Evolutions is going to break the internet. It's going to break the hobby. It is absolutely going to set this new precedent. I don't even know what to expect, which is wild, because normally I at least feel like I have some inclination of what might happen, but everything is sold out. You can't find anything anywhere. I don't know what January 17th is going to bring. I just hope everybody, you know, is as civil as they can be in all of these local card shops and in all of these big box stores, and behaves as well as they can, because I have a feeling this is going to be probably the most sought after product, even more so than 151, which is just really incredible to say. So this product is going to be a lot of heat. So if you're out there shopping for this, please be kind and you know, be respectful of everybody else there. But happy hunting, go get it. I guarantee you I'm going to try and get as much as I can. And then the final thing that I always talk about in this state of the hobby, and this is just the overall grading volume in the TCG space month over month. Now, I do a dedicated video in the very beginning of every month. We look at the actual grading volume from CGC, SGC, Beckett, and specifically PSA. PSA grades more cards by multiples than any of those other companies. So we look at the most graded cards, we look at the most graded sets, we look at the most graded characters, we look at gem rates by era. It is a really, really insightful video, but we always end it looking at the total number of TCG cards graded by month at PSA. And PSA and their TCG grading, it's been on a downward trend for most of this year. But if you look, 3 of the last 4 months have been very, very strong. There's been a ton ton of PSA TCG graded cards, which is really exciting. You know, again, having a high grading volume, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, it just shows that there's a lot of investor and collector interest. People are getting cards graded for a couple of different reasons, right? Either they, think that they're great long-term investments, they want to keep them in the personal collection, or B, they think it could be a quick and flip, right? They could actually get these graded and sell them for a profit. But either way, when people are having things graded, it's because there seems to be some term of either short-term or long-term belief in the cards. So when I see TCG grading as high as it is, it gets me really exciting. So that's it. That is the state of the hobby for the month of December. I am going to pull up a whole year view, which I think is going to be a ton of fun. We'll talk about this at a much more macro level, and I hope that you made it to the end of this video and you're excited about seeing that, because it's going to come out in a couple days from now. And if you made it to the end of the video and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, I hope you enjoyed the content, and I hope you hit that subscribe button. If you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up, and if you got questions or comments, drop them down below. I hope you have an epic one. I appreciate you more than I can say, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.